Welcome to On the Issues. I'm Irma Lauter, Chair of the Board of Selectmen for Hingham. And with me today is Bob Curley, Chair of the Community Preservation Commission. And after we talk about issues a little bit, we're going to discuss CPC. So today's program is really all about our CPC and what a wonderful tool it is for the town. First off, really the only issue, other than the last weekends of summer, that is percolating in the town is the continuing issue and discussion on the turf field at the middle school. The school committee has now weighed in, and I would urge everybody to watch the replay on HCAM. And the school building committee will meet on September 3rd to discuss and potentially take some votes on the issue. So again, I urge everybody who has an interest or wants their voice heard to please attend that meeting and send your letters and cards and recommendations in to the three selectmen, certainly the school building committee and the school committee. So now let's turn to the CPC. Bob Curley, Chair for the second year of the CPC. Why don't you start us off with a little bit of background on the CPC and what it means to Hingham?
Well, the CPC is derived from the Community Preservation Act, referred to as the CPA, which was a piece of legislation by which the state legislature decided to establish a mechanism for state funds to come to local communities for the purposes of historic preservation, the preservation of open space, and for the establishment and encouragement of affordable community housing. And the legislation was passed, I think about 14 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. Hingham was one of the first adopters of the legislation. And Hingham has benefited greatly over the last 12 years of approval of CPC projects by preserving important parts of our history, by acquiring significant pieces of open space. The CPA has been expanded in the last 2 years to allow for more investment in recreation, and we have also made significant investments in affordable housing. The funds for the CPC in the town of Hingham basically derive from a 1.5% surtax on Hingham real estate taxes, to a very limited extent through stamp fees on deeds and that sort of thing. And the rest comes from state matching funds. And we're very fortunate this year that the legislature added an extra $25 million to the funding that was available to CPA communities. And so just last year, roughly, I think we derived about $800,000 from local funding and about $400,000 from state funding. And I think we'll probably be in that general ballpark again this year, but we always take a close look at the numbers.
Which is wonderful. That's money that goes to projects that we would not normally be able to do through our normal capital outlay process, because there's so many needs in the town for capital outlay money that CPC money is just a wonderful addition. So it's very exciting. Bob, why don't we talk a little bit about the committee, which I am so lucky to sit on.
Well, the committee is established by a town bylaw, and the members of the committee are fundamentally appointees from other committees. So the Historical Commission has appointed me, for example. The selectmen have a representative and also an appointee. The Recreation Department has an appointee. Affordable Housing has an appointee. And the Conservation Commission has an appointee. Then there are 2 moderators appointments, and that fills out the 9 people on the committee. Now, we are very fortunate this year to have, as we have in the past, but this year I think we're especially fortunate to have a very incredibly talented group of members. And we've talked about this earlier, that in some ways this is a committee of chairpeople.
Yes.
Scott McIsaac, who is the chair of conservation, is a member. Vicki Donlin, who is the chair of recreation, is a member. Gary Tondorf-Dick is the chair of planning, and he is a member. You, of course, are the chair of the Board of Selectmen, and we're very fortunate to have you as a member. And I also happen to chair the Historical Commission.
And the CPC.
And the CPC. And then our roster is filled out by Kathleen Peters, who brings great and astute financial insight to our deliberations. Tony Kiernan was just appointed to the CPC. And Jim Watson is the appointee from Housing.
And then Matt Zyper.
And then Matt Zyper, who is the president of the Trust for Public Land, serves as our vice chair.
And he's amazing, the wealth of knowledge that man has with open space and all the trust lands and all the laws that go along with that. And it's just phenomenal.
We were very fortunate to have Matt on the committee, and Matt had previous experience with the town of Norwell's Community Preservation Commission. Yeah. And he's been a tremendous asset to have as the vice chair.
Now, holding us all together is Carol Costello, who provides amazing administrative services to us in form of making sure we have all the documents, and they are voluminous, and making sure we have them in a timely manner, scheduling visits when we go to look at pieces of land or historic artifacts that want preservation. She's also done something I thought was really amazing. There's so much paper that goes with the CPC that you really have to deal with. Carol pulled together from disparate sources a manual. So now we have it all in one place, and there's a lot of spreadsheets that she's put together for us. One of the more important ones that was really an eye-opener to me was when we buy land, the checklist of everything that has to be done, and also the estimated costs along with it, so that you don't go into something not knowing that maybe it only costs you $100,000 for the piece of land, but oh, by the way, there's other things along the way. So Carol Costello takes very good care of us.
Well, we do walk in the footsteps of the giants that went before us.
Definitely Dan Coughlin among them.
And Bill Reardon, and
yep.
a lot of prominent town citizens have been involved with the CPC. And over the years, a lot of knowledge has been acquired and developed, and you're absolutely right. Carol, who is one of the most organized people in the world.
She is.
Pulled this all together, and I think that the town of Hingham now has probably the most comprehensive CPC manual in the Commonwealth. And we will share that with the CPA Coalition, which for anybody who is watching this is a tremendous resource of knowledge about what happens in CPA communities throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. If you Google on Community Preservation Act, their website will come up, and they've got a long history of all the different CPA projects that have gone on in many, many different towns. And let me add that in addition to Carol, we are very blessed to have Roger Fernandez, the town engineer, serve as an advisor to us with respect to almost anything that is involving construction.
Yep.
And supervision of any building project, so that we try to be very careful to make sure that CPA money is spent appropriately.
Many ways Roger saves money, in that with him watching over it and trying to not cut corners, but make the best use of the money, that our projects really don't cost quite as much as they could if we didn't have him.
Well, I think almost every project that Roger has been involved with has come in under budget, and we have received money back to the CPA fund.
Which is great, because then we can turn it around and give it out to other projects. Before we talk schedule, let's talk about the 4 different categories and maybe highlight a couple projects. And why don't we start with what the survey that was taken of Hingham citizens said was their top priority: open space.
Well, about every 2 years the CPC has done a survey, and the citizens of Hingham have indicated that their number 1 priority for the use of CPC funds has been open space. And so if I start with some of the most recent acquisitions going backwards, I think it will give people the concept of what we're after. And I also want to give a salute to the Open Space Committee.
Yes.
Because we rely most heavily on their recommendations, because they are the real subject matter experts in this area. So much so that this year, because of the quantity of open space applications that we received, we've indicated that basically we're going to ask the Open Space Committee to give priority to certain parcels, and it will be those ones that we primarily focus on. But for example, last year we bought a parcel of Boy Scout land.
Yes.
In the Liberty Pole area. It has one of Hingham's only cold water streams on it, and it is adjacent to an existing conservation parcel that the town already owned. A year or so before the acquisition of the Boy Scout land, we acquired 2 parcels in South Hingham, the Accord Brook parcel, which is a very sizable parcel that contains part of the Accord Brook, which is a key water resource in terms of the town water supply. And as Cliff Prentice, who our former conservation officer, indicated, if you don't control the supply, you really don't control the water. So watershed parcels are very important in terms of open space acquisitions. In the same area of town, we also acquired a parcel of land on Scotland Street that was adjacent again to other town conservation land. You can almost see a green belt forming, running from the Accord Brook parcel across Main Street, over existing conservation land, down towards the town forest, and ultimately to Wampatuck State Park. Other significant open space acquisitions have been where the mobile station was.
Absolutely, that was a phenomenal one.
On the harbor. And in our survey, the citizens of Hingham have also indicated that opening up the waterfront is a top priority as well. We have made investments in the bathing beach, which I know was the subject of a recent Hingham Journal article, in terms of stabilizing the shoreline to prevent erosion in storms. I wouldn't be surprised to see the trustees of the bathing beach coming back to us this year, because they had actually provided a phased proposal to us last year, and the additional phases involved parking lot work. So we look forward to working with them again last year, should they, this year, if they should provide an application. And I think I probably hit most of the highlights on open space.
One of the key points that you mentioned that I think is important for our viewers to hear is this whole concept of the linkage of the parcels. The work that goes into picking the parcels and understanding how it fits in the great mosaic in the town is amazing. I thought I knew CPC until I was lucky enough to get a seat on it. I only knew the tip of an iceberg, and the work and the thought process that goes into why we should buy a piece of land versus, gee, isn't it pretty? but the linkage, the ability as we go forward with Abby Pearsall and her conservation people, and that's why Scott McIsaac is so important, to provide for trails so that people can walk the town through the woods and through beautiful segments of this town that nobody really knows exists. So I think it's very important, and the importance of buying the land is paramount.
And just to follow up to that, the Accord Brook parcel is adjacent to the new middle school. And I know one thought that someone had was opening that up because of the parking at the middle school by way of a bridge over what is the riverbed. That would be the kind of thing that is on people's radar for the future.
Now, how about historic preservation, which is also, actually all four of these categories are near and dear to my heart, but historic preservation, one of the projects I was involved in. But why don't you pick some good ones and share with people that they might not know?
Well, there was the bell tower restoration, which is preserving a 100-year-old structure owned by the town. There's a new bell ringing floor that is there, and the work was just phenomenal. And that's a project that Roger Fernandez brought in under budget.
Super.
There have been multiple projects on the GAR Hall.
Oh my, yes.
Including exterior painting as well as the preservation of historical photographs and artifacts inside the GAR Hall. There have been projects at the Bear Cove Fire Museum, the so-called head house, because it was the head of the rope walk, which is out behind Town Hall, has been
And it's
preserved.
the only piece of the rope walk that's left, and the cordage factory.
And it's a wonderful structure. Sally Weston's done a great job with that, and Recreation took the initiative in getting that preserved for their recreation programs, for which it is an integral part. There have been projects at the old Ship Church and the old Ordinary. There have been significant preservation projects at Hingham's cemeteries. I think most people don't realize that cemeteries aren't really owned by the town.
Right.
They're owned by private cemetery associations, and as they get old, often there isn't a source of revenue to preserve important markers and monuments to our previous citizens. And
some of whom are very famous.
And the CPC has provided funding to do that and to keep the cemeteries looking in the kind of shape that they should look.
And the Ames Chapel.
The Ames.
Oh my, I never knew. You know, you walk by it and you say, oh, isn't that interesting, historic structure. The preservation of that, and the people that are involved with the Ames Chapel have really done a great deal of work on their own, going out and getting grants. But there is the most spectacular stained glass window in there that is breathtaking.
Yes.
And that building is going to be available for use for meetings and for community space.
Yes, the Cemetery Association for Ames did a wonderful job, and that's actually a good example of the CPC providing leverage to other funds that are being provided by outside groups, which the CPC sees as part of its role to provide the seed money for projects which are going to be matched by other groups. Ames is spectacular. I'm looking forward to seeing the ultimately finished project.
Me too.
Because it will be a great town meeting place in a key location. And I know the folks at Ames welcome town and community groups or private groups to seek them out to use the Ames Chapel. And we have on the drawing boards, of course, the Hingham Heritage Museum and Visitor Center, which we really haven't started work on yet. Fundraising is still going on. I'm sure that anybody who's listening who would like to make a contribution, they would love to see a contribution to one of the most important historic projects in the town of Hingham.
And large or small, all contributions are certainly welcome. And I recently learned that, because I didn't even think about this, the Historic Society has to move out while all the work is being done.
Yes, that's correct.
And didn't even think about that, but it's going to be such a massive reconstruction that it can't be done around them. So what has happened, that's in progress now, is Talbot's has offered space at no charge for the Historical Society to move in and exist and do all their good works while the Heritage Museum is being formed. And that's going to be really exciting when that happens.
That's wonderful, because I thought, they were thinking at one point, I think, of being in the old ordinary, which could be a little cold in the winter. So that's a wonderful solution.
Then we'll find out what the term hardy New Englander really means.
Well, Suzanne Buchanan was telling me that when people went there to Derby originally, each of the children would have to bring a stick of firewood.
Oh, geez.
Because they were warming themselves by the fireplaces at either end of the school hall in the winter.
We have such great historic resources in this town. We really do, and preserving them is really very important. Let's go to the next category.
Well, affordable housing,
yes,
was something that in many ways we've spent a lot of time and attention on in past years, looking for appropriate projects. And I think with the establishment of the Affordable Housing Trust, that we have a new entity in town that is going to be able to very effectively use CPC funds to establish and create affordable housing. I know recently, with funding that was provided last year, they bought a condominium on Beale Street.
Beals Cove condos.
Beals Cove,
yep.
And that will now be made an affordable property in perpetuity. And it's a great way to establish affordable housing. Tim White and the Affordable Housing Trust are doing a great job being creative and coming up with ideas for preserving and creating affordable housing in the town of Hingham.
And what's great is this Opportunity Fund, which was really established this past year, gives them the ability to go out and buy when something comes in the market, that either it's a small house or, like we were fortunate, this condominium at Beals Cove, that they don't have to wait for a CPC cycle or an annual meeting cycle, because these opportunities are very fleeting. You know, the lower end of the market in Hingham is not as vast as it used to be.
And it's been one of the past problems with affordable housing and the CPC, because and we could probably talk about this in a little bit, we're typically getting applications in October, vetting them and making our recommendations to the town meeting, which isn't happening until April. And so there's a long time window, because the CPC only recommends. We don't have the ability to spend anything other than our own administrative funds, and those are approved by town meeting as well. So by giving money to the Opportunity Fund, the Housing Trust can seize opportunities that otherwise
and can jump right on them.
Couldn't address through the CPC process.
And the linkage is they'll come back and they'll report back to the CPC on how they've spent the money. So there is kind of a trust but verify and watching. But there is a great group of people who are really looking to spread affordable housing throughout the town rather than cluster it in one area. And this is a great way to do it.
And for many units, it's going to be a revolving process, because investments can be made in properties that can then be actually sold as affordable units, and the money goes back to the Housing Trust to be
do it
used
again
in the same way again.
Yep.
I understand the recent purchase, though, is going to be for a rental unit.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So both rental and
which is really kind of a breakthrough
units
for us, because we've tended to stay single family oriented or single unit type of, in keeping with the traditional housing in Hingham. So they're doing a great job. They really are. Last category.
Well, recreation
folded into open space.
Has been fairly new and is closely associated with open space. But in recent years, for example, the inline skating rink behind Town Hall was resurfaced. The basketball court was resurfaced. We already mentioned the Head House project, which was through Recreation.
And the Bradley Woods Playground?
The Bradley Woods Playground was discussed extensively at our last CPC meeting last week. The work has been done. I understand it is a real success, and I know that Mark Thorell had presented to us some years ago a 5-year plan for addressing neighborhood playgrounds. I understand that there were handicap access issues that were identified and addressed at the Bradley Woods Playground, and that those have been successfully resolved.
Super. Let's go to schedule, which was really one of the other main reasons I invited Bob today. This year, CPC is going to hold a little tighter to the schedule. They've always been very gracious about people who miss dates, but we are having so many projects, and they're all very worthy projects.
Well, the two principal dates that people need to be aware of now are next Friday.
Pay attention.
We have adopted a preliminary application process this year, which we have said is optional, but we really do want to see people follow the preliminary application process. And that will allow us to identify fairly quickly whether a project is going to be eligible or not, because there are certain eligibility requirements that need to be met with respect to each CPC project. We have received applications at the last minute that are substantially incomplete, and it really isn't fair to the applicants who go to a lot of time and trouble to put together very detailed proposals to have someone else coming in at the last minute with barely developed ideas. So we really do want to get people to get everything lined up from the very beginning. The actual applications that will be needed this year, the formal application, is due on October 9th, 2014. But the sooner the better. And Carol Costello, who's at the DPW building, would be happy to work with people, and would be happy to get a project manager assigned to people as early as possible to make that application process as user-friendly as we can.
And what I like about the it's not a newer process where you try and front load the work. Many times people coming in with their application don't realize all the documents and all the work that they need to do to then work with a CPC project manager. So by front loading this, getting a good look at all the applications early on, we'll be able to help people more and also put more projects through the paces. So hopefully everybody's paid attention to the two important dates. Next Friday and October 9th. So with that, I want to thank Bob Curley and for all of his time, but also for all the work that he does. Because now sitting side by side with the entire group, it's phenomenal. He has to also have a twin. We're convinced. But it's very much appreciated, and then the people that came before us also.
Well, thank you, Irma. It's nice to have the opportunity to work with so many talented people to make our town what it is and even better.
Amen to that. That's a great committee. So we both wish you a happy Labor Day, a very safe Labor Day, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.